The following program is made possible in part by the Dayton Bar Association.
Welcome to You and the Law. I'm obviously not Mike Monta. Mike is unable to be with us this evening. My name is Judge Mary E. Donovan. I'm a judge on the 2nd District Court of Appeals here in Montgomery County. We also serve Darke, Clark, Greene, Miami, and Champaign counties. Our topic tonight is women in the law. Before we get to our discussion, let me remind you that You and the Law is a monthly program produced here at the studio of DATV. DATV is Channel 5 in Dayton, Channel 6 in the suburbs, and is the public access channel of Spectrum. The program is also cablecast on Spectrum via the auspices of the Miami Valley Cable Council. Executive producer is Mike Brigner, a retired domestic relations judge. This is coming to you live and in color. It is an audience participation program, and we do encourage your calls. This show also streams live on datv.com. We are sponsored by the Dayton Bar Association, and we will tell you a little bit more about the Dayton Bar Association and their services later in the program. I'll have the panelists now introduce themselves, and I'll have each one tell you a little bit about themselves. And we'll begin with Judge Mary Wiseman.
Thank you, Judge Donovan. I presently am a judge with the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas General Division, and I've been there since 2007. And prior to that, I was in the private practice of law with law firms in the Dayton area, and I specialized in complex commercial litigation, and I'm a graduate of the University of Arkansas School of Law.
Thank you. Now turning to Ann Keaton.
Thank you, Judge. I'm Ann Keaton. I am a shareholder with Friend, Freeze, and Arnold in downtown Dayton. Before that, I was with several other firms in Dayton, practicing primarily in civil defense litigation. And I went to the University of Virginia undergrad and the University of Kentucky College of Law.
Thank you, Ann, and I'm sorry about UVA and University of Kentucky, and we guarantee we'll be done by NCAA tournament time at 9:19 this evening. And now I'll turn to Cassandra Rice.
Thank you, Judge. I'm Cassandra Rice. I am an attorney with Godschlick and Portune. Before that, I was a staff attorney with Judge Singer at the Montgomery County Common Pleas Court. I went to the University of Dayton for law school, and I was also a student at Purdue University for undergrad.
Thank you all, and we are going to encourage audience participation. In a few minutes, there'll be a number up on the screen for you to call in, but I'll ask each one of the ladies here this evening, and I'll start with you, Judge. What prompted you to become a lawyer?
Well, I didn't decide to become a lawyer until I had gone to college, and I'd started out as an engineering major, and after a couple of years of that study and taking lots of classes in mathematics and computer science, I realized I did not want to do that for a living, that I was going to be miserable if I had to do that for a living. So I opted to go with something that I knew that I loved, which was reading and analyzing and being a critical thinker, as well as talking and debating issues with individuals. And so I became a liberal arts major in undergrad and wanted to take that forward to going to law school. So it was really finding something that resonated with what I thought my personal strengths were and my personal interests were. But it was a decision that I made very late after taking way too many math classes in college.
I took way too many Spanish classes in college, but I can understand the interest in debate. I was a litigator, and my debate instructor was instrumental in my decision to become a lawyer. Now, how about you, Anne?
Well, I, like Judge Wiseman, started out in the sciences. I started out at UVA as a chemistry major, ended up being an economics major, but really what happened was I had two very close uncles to me who were both lawyers, and I admired them, and they were mentors to me growing up. They passed away when I was in high school. So I started out chemistry major pre-med, quickly discovered that their deaths had affected me more than I realized, and so going into hospitals and doctor offices somehow became really uncomfortable for me. So I started thinking about what other professions I could do. And I think that their skills, their life lessons, and their professional careers really influenced me. I remember my Uncle George talking about calling his clients to tell them and driving to see them personally to tell them about decisions that had come down, and how personally he took helping people. And so that's sort of what led me toward the law.
I too had an uncle who was a lawyer, Joe King, a wonderful small-town lawyer in Ludlow, Kentucky. And what I remember about him, because of the flexibility with schedules, he was the one who often took us to Reds games. And for those Red fans out there, I'm sorry, it's been a miserable start to the season, but there's no place to go but forward. And Cassandra, how about you? What prompted you to become a lawyer?
I actually wanted to be a lawyer since I was probably 8 years old. And fascinatingly, I went to one of the premier engineering colleges to start my career down that path. Wanted to do psychology in undergrad and was able to do that at Purdue. Came back home, well, the home region, I'm from Cincinnati, and came back to UD to do law school, and started off and met my husband in law school on the third day of orientation, and he is from the Dayton area, so we decided to make Dayton our home.
Well, I too am from Cincinnati originally, but now since you've mentioned your husband is a lawyer, do you perceive his practice to be significantly different than yours in any way related to your gender, or it's just an entirely different practice?
We are both litigators, so we do have a lot of similarities in what we do. I feel that there are differences in the way we are treated in our profession, but there is not an inherent difference in what we do and how we approach the job. I think that he is expected to be at the office more, and he's expected to have later hours, and I have more flexibility, especially to take care of our son. I think that between the two of us, we are treated a little bit differently when it comes to how we go into the courtroom and how we are perceived in the courtroom. But really, I think that my generation is at a phase where the differences are starting to soften, and we're starting to be treated more fairly.
And Mary, like me, although you're not as old as me, you're significantly younger. Do you see a difference in the way male and female attorneys are treated as litigators? And obviously, as a judge, you serve with a number of male judges. Are you treated differently as a female?
So the law is a wonderful field for women because there are amazing opportunities there. And the ability to become a judge, for example, I don't think is predicted one way or the other on the basis of gender. And certainly in my courtroom, when litigators walk through the courtroom doors, I don't have any different expectation based on gender. Now, you can certainly hear stories through the courthouse hallways of courtrooms where both males and females believe that they might have gotten treated differently in the courtroom based on gender. And but I think the judges try to do as much as they can to eliminate both conscious and unconscious biases that they have with regard to the attorneys that are practicing in their courtrooms. And so the women that practice in front of me are phenomenal prosecutors, phenomenal public defenders, phenomenal litigators, as are the men. But you do see that there are different styles. There's different styles among women and there's different styles among men. And you as the judge, I think, meld yourself to what that dynamic is, while at the same time calling the balls and strikes to get it done as correctly and accurately as you think that it can be. And sometimes things get tense in a courtroom. And from my perspective, it's the role of the judge to be the person that is calm, cool, and collected and diffuse that tension so that people can focus on what's important for that particular case.
Okay. How about you, Ann? I know you're a litigator, and if you want to tell our audience what type of litigation specifically you do.
Sure. I primarily do insurance defense litigation. I often tell people when they wonder what that is exactly that generally speaking, I do anything that anyone, any person or any company can be insured for. So anything from a rear-end car accident case all the way up to a products liability case. I defend those, and they're civil suits, so I don't really handle criminal law. I handle suits where one person is suing another. But as far as noticing differences in my practice between maybe how men or women are treated, I have not noticed that certainly in courtrooms. Maybe sometimes I might have felt a difference a few years ago when I was younger, but I think that was more attributed to my youth. I was always taught in law school that you can overcome inexperience by hard work. So knowing your case more and better than anyone else in the courtroom was always my goal. I hope that I do that, but I don't know that I've noticed a difference gender-wise.
Okay, then. And Cassandra, you mentioned you have a young baby. There has been some discussion that sometimes women's careers are interrupted by maternity leave and taking care of children. What has been your own experience as far as the birth of your son?
Sure. I think the changes certainly are twofold. There's the struggles and the stresses of the job, certainly, that a woman has to face, but also there is an element of a hormonal change that goes on when you do have a child. Or even, there is a change in the way that you generally function as a parent if you adopt a child or bring a child into your home. And so those large home changes certainly affect your work-life balance, and they affect your ability to perform at your job. And I think when you're balancing those stresses, it's difficult for women, and it's certainly perceived that women should want to stay home with their children and raise their children. And I think there's that societal pressure that is put on women more than men. And so when I was looking to go on maternity leave and when I was looking to come back, I wanted to make sure I steeled myself for a certain outcome. I wanted to, if things went well, I was happy, but if they didn't, I was okay with that as well. Certainly, my situation is a little bit different than most. I was thrown into trial prep and a trial in October, so I had gotten off of maternity leave in August and went straight into a very stressful point in a litigator's life. And when you're balancing dropping off your child at daycare for the first day and then walking into a deposition the next hour, it's one of those moments where you have to dry your eyes and move on. So it's a little bit of a different experience than most mothers have going into coming off of maternity leave and going back to work.
Well, you walked right back into the fire of litigation and were prepared for it. That's pretty amazing.
Certainly.
And I know, Anne, you have 2 children. And before we get to that subject, I want to remind our audience that we welcome calls. The topic tonight is women in the law. We have 3 women on our panel with decades of experience between them. So feel free to call in with any questions. The number is 223-5311. We welcome your phone calls. And tell me, how do you achieve that work-life balance with 2 boys?
You know, I'm fortunate that I have worked at places that really foster growth of female attorneys. So I was previously at Subashi and Wildermuth, and both Nick Subashi and Brian Wildermuth really helped encouraged me to continue to grow as an attorney. And now I'm fortunate enough to be at Friend, Fries and Arnold, which has a large contingent of female litigators who have children. And we often talk about this issue of there's a lot of pressure to do all and be all and excel at all. And whether that's true pressure from others or pressure from ourselves because we're just such type A personalities, I do think that there is a lot of pressure to do everything, and as my father put it, if it looks easy, then you're doing it right. But it's really hard. It's really hard to balance having another or a spouse with a career whose career is also growing, and you want to make sure that you're encouraging them in their growth. You want to make sure you're doing the best for your clients and for your law firm. And often, as we all know, the law is a jealous mistress and wants a whole lot of our time. And if you're doing it well, you're giving a whole lot of your time. But then you've got children, and I have 2 amazing boys. They are currently at the 3rd grade square dance. And I apologize for missing out on it, and my youngest said, "You're lucky, Mom." And I was like, "Oh, I won't tell your teacher you said that." Yeah. But it's just a matter of figuring it out, and sort of where there's a will, there's a way, and unfortunately sometimes that stress becomes a norm and you don't even know you're stressed anymore. But it's just a matter of doing it. As Cassandra said, you just put on your shoes and grab your bag and you go out and do.
Get it done.
So, yeah.
And Judge Wiseman, I'd like to get to you on that subject, but we have a call on line 1, and I don't want our caller to give up, so we'll take the caller's question or comment. Hello?
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, what's your question, please?
Question is, I have a niece that's interested into going into law, and I'm wondering if this is a good field for women at this time, specifically in the Dayton area, and which is the best field to maybe start out on, whether it be contract, family, or prosecution.
Oh, I suspect we're all happy to answer that. I'm not a panelist. I'll probably have an answer in a moment, but it's Judge Wiseman's turn to speak, so I'm sure she has an opinion to share with you.
Yeah, I would strongly encourage your niece to explore a career in the law. The law has been so wonderful to me. It's opened up doors and opportunities that I never dreamed I would have the opportunity to be part of. And whether your niece is interested in doing contracting or real estate law, I would just encourage her to get involved. If she's younger, to get involved in some pre-law programs, if she's going to college, to take some classes that expose her to some legal concepts, typically a business law type course, or some other courses that a college might offer to give you some insights as to what it is that lawyers really do with their time, and to then not lock herself into a particular type of law, because a lot of us change, just like you hear people that have changed their college majors. A lot of lawyers start out in one field and they gravitate because of their interests or job opportunities or other things of interest. They end up in a different field of the law. And I know a lot of people that have made those transitions over the course of their career. You're fortunate if your niece is from this area. We have so many great law schools. University of Dayton School of Law, University of Cincinnati, The Ohio State University, Toledo, Northern Kentucky, and the one further up north in Ada. We have a lot of great law schools in this region. So she just can't go wrong with pursuing a career in the law from my perspective. It has just been a wonderful and fulfilling choice for me.
That's a pretty thorough response, Judge, but Cassandra, Ann, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add specifically with regard to the part of the question about the Dayton area is that Dayton has such a wonderful bar and bench. Practicing in the Montgomery County courts, I think any local lawyer would tell you, is a wonderful place to practice. The judges will mentor you. The other attorneys will mentor you. But also just the bar itself, it's such a good place to practice, good people, and it's not particularly contentious. And I've found it to be a great place to grow my skills as a lawyer, irrespective of gender, but I do think that Dayton's a great place to practice.
Anything to add,
Thank
Cassandra?
you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I was going to tell you I have 2 nieces that are lawyers, one in New York and one in Virginia, and 2 in law school now. And I would never discourage a young man or a young woman from considering the law. It's a wonderful profession. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Now, we were talking about work-life balance. I know, Judge Wiseman, I've often seen your bike on the bike rack of your vehicle in the back parking lot of the courthouse. So I know you spend time enjoying life, but the position of a judge is very demanding in terms of your time. How do you achieve your own work-life balance?
Well, I've learned that as a judge, it's important to take care of yourself, because I want to give the lawyers and the litigants that come through the doors of my courtroom my absolute best. And it took me a long time in life to realize that I needed to treat myself with kindness and care so that I could in turn give my absolute best to the public and the citizens who are relying on my services. And so I carve out time to ride my bike. I carve out time to go jogging on my lunch hour. And what I've discovered is I go to bed really early and I get up really early, and I mean really, really early, so that I can take care of the things that take care of myself and still meet my schedule with my court. And then I carve out the time that I can, and sometimes it's taking a walk around the block at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I try to do what I can when I can and stay very consistent with that. And I think that's really important. And as Cassandra and Ann have noted, it's very common for women to work so hard in taking care of others, taking care of their children and their significant others and their clients and their law partners, that unfortunately they themselves neglect themselves and don't make that a priority. And I think it's an important lesson to learn that you've got to take care of yourself, because if you're not doing that, you just don't have the capacity or the resilience to put on the table what you need to in order to take care of others in the way that you want to.
I know one thing we've done in the Court of Appeals, which is a bit of a godsend. We now have stand-up desks, so we don't spend as much time sitting researching and writing, which is what we do a lot of in the Court of Appeals. And my own staff attorney, who's the mother of 5, always makes time to go work out every day rather than have lunch, so we recognize it's important. I do see that we apparently have another call, and we do urge you to call 223-5311, but we'll take the call right now. Caller, what's your question or comment?
Hi, yes, I heard you speaking about the positive experiences in the legal profession, in the courtroom, and with the judges. My question is a little bit more for your experiences with clients. Have any of you experienced any type of clients that don't want to work with a female attorney or who bypass you for another male in the office? And if so, how did you deal with that? Because it balances the interests of your client, but also the interests of you and your profession.
Anne, would you like to take that question?
Sure.
Okay.
I have not had the experience where a client has not wanted me because I'm a woman or maybe sought to transfer to a male attorney. In fact, what I've had is a client seek me because I'm a woman. And we were actually talking about this a little bit beforehand all together. Because, there's a concern sometimes. I think clients think, well, I'm going to have a woman, she's going to sort of not be window dressing, but give this feel to this side of the courtroom. But the clients who have hired me saying, I want a female trial attorney, is because they see the differences in perhaps how we can approach cross-examining a witness. That some questions of perhaps a female plaintiff may come across differently from me than it would from perhaps a more aggressive male lawyer. Not to say that I'm not aggressive, but it can come across differently. So I've never had that experience, but I can say that, part of my job is to meet my client's needs. And sometimes there may be a case where a client does not want to work with me for whatever reason and prefers a different attorney. And I think I do have to respect that client's wishes, obviously, but then maybe within my own firm be talking to the other attorneys about, so how do we address this in the future? Mm-hmm. What's best to do? I want to make sure that I'm getting clients. I'm not sure that I'm even answering your question fully, but I'm trying. But Judge, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, and it's a great question. Exactly what we were talking about before we started filming. There are clients who I think have a stereotype in their mind that their attorney is going to look just like Atticus Finch. They're going to be tall, male, have that baritone voice, and that's what they expect, and that's what they go in to hire when they go into a law firm. And then I walk in, right, and I don't look anything like Atticus Finch. And so there are clients that just insist on having that male figure there representing them. That's what they want. And I always felt great because my law partners would try to explain to that client, we know that that's what you want, but what you need is the lawyer that's most knowledgeable about this area of the law and has experience in trying these types of cases, and that's Mary. And so, yeah, she does not have a baritone voice, and she's not 6'2", but for achieving the goal that you want out of this lawsuit, she's the best lawyer for you. And then likewise with Anne, I've also had clients who came in and they wanted a female lawyer really to try to change some form of what they perceived as leverage in the case, or they thought their case would be perceived more sympathetically if they had a female lawyer. And on those instances, we're always very clear about explaining to the client, if you hire me, it's got to be for real. I've got to be your lawyer and not your window dressing, because a judge and the jury will see through window dressing and it will have the opposite effect that you're trying to accomplish. They will resent the fact that you are trying to generate sympathy or some form of compassion or empathy on a false basis. And the last thing you ever want to be in a courtroom is inauthentic. You must be genuine and authentic and bring your most credible self forward. So there would be those instances when we would tell clients, we can't do that. It's not in your best interest to have me sit at counsel table, or it's not in your best interest to do that. So I think it's important to have colleagues, as Ann said, that work through those client biases, as well as to have very direct conversations yourself with the clients about what their goals are for a particular lawsuit and how they can best accomplish those goals. And typically, it does not involve the gender of the lawyer that's going to be representing them.
It's curious that you bring up Atticus Finch, because there's currently some litigation you may have read about by the estate of Harper Lee regarding a playwright who is doing a new play based upon To Kill a Mockingbird, and how they're going to portray all the characters. I read To Kill a Mockingbird rather late in life when I was a public defender for more than a decade, and years later someone, when I left the office, gave me a book that said, "To this generation's Atticus Finch," which I took as a real compliment, because I was a tenacious lawyer, but also not 6'2" and a male baritone voice. But Cassandra, you probably haven't been in the practice long enough to have had a client indicate they did not want a female attorney. You've only practiced for 5 years?
Correct. And I haven't had a lot of experience with clients that have an opinion about my gender. There has been one instance where a client told me that she did not believe a female could be as aggressive as what she would need. And I think that's a perception among female attorneys that we're constantly fighting against, is being aggressive, but also not coming off as the opposite end of the spectrum, which is bossy or irritating or whatever adjective you would like to use for a female attorney. And so I think female attorneys that are litigators often struggle with a perception in the courtroom and with clients and also with male partners in trying to come off as assertive, but not another word.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I just came out of a trial a couple of weeks ago, and I really had to kind of go after the plaintiff, and afterward I remember thinking, oh, was that too much? It felt very natural for me, and as it turned out, the jury loved it and loved me and loved my client, and it all worked out well. But there are those moments when you think to yourself, that felt natural to me, but of course I'm a litigator and this is what we do and we're all in it day in and day out. Are people watching it thinking, oh, what's she doing? And she's being too mean and too harsh. And
if you don't mind, ladies, we're going to shift gears for a moment here. We have another caller. We'll take that call in a moment, but do we still have the last call? Does that answer your question, I hope? And that last call is no longer with us, but we do have a call waiting, but we do have some business to deal with first. It's important that the audience recognize that this program is sponsored by the Dayton Bar Association, and they have a website, DaytonBar.org. Both Judge Wiseman and myself have been past presidents of the Dayton Bar. We are past presidents of the Dayton Bar. It's a meaningful organization that assists members of the community as well as the attorneys in our community. We have a lawyer's referral service, and that number, if you need it, is 222-6102. We also have a volunteer lawyers project, which assists individuals that need help in the civil arena. We also have a speakers bureau through the Dayton Bar, and that number is 222-7902. That's 222-7902. And an important program also that the Dayton Bar sponsors is Wills for Heroes. It is a program that provides free and other estate planning documents to first responders and their spouses. Any qualified first responder would include a firefighter, police officer, paramedic, corrections, and probation officers. And volunteer lawyers will assist you by preparing wills and powers of attorney free of charge. The next program is April 14th at the Kettering Fire Department from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and that's on April 14th. And then again on June 2nd at the Harrison Township Community Center, same time, 10 to 1:30 p.m. So we thank our Dayton Bar Association for sponsoring this program. And I think we have another call, ladies. Yes, caller? Are you there? It would seem that we've lost that call, so once again, you're welcome to call with questions or comment. The number is 223-5311. It's right up there on your screen. So we welcome calls for the ladies that are here tonight. Mike Monta, the regular host, had informed me, ladies, that if we do a very good job tonight, we might be the new View. So keep that in mind.
That would be awesome.
We love our day jobs, but we're not going to give them up. So let's shift gears here for a moment before we get another call. How would you advise the average person who's looking for a lawyer? I just obviously provided our audience with the number for the Dayton Bar, the lawyer referral service, but the average person that needs a lawyer, what would you recommend he or she do? Anne, I'm looking right at you. And if you don't want to go first,
No,
I'll lay it on the judge.
I know what a lot of people do is Google, right? You get online and you type in, I need a lawyer to defend me in a criminal case, or I have a DUI, and you're going to see lots of advertising. You're going to see, lots of websites and that sort of thing. And I really would recommend that you look at a lot of them, call them and talk to them. Find out from your friends or family or relatives. Word of mouth, I think, is perhaps the best. If you know any lawyers, I get a lot of calls from people who, and from friends who maybe want a lawyer or need a lawyer. It's not the type of law I do, but they know I might know someone that they could recommend. And so I think going by reference is at least that's what I would do.
Okay, well, apparently we have a caller, and maybe it's on that subject, but it can be on any subject. Caller, are you there with a question or comment?
Yes, hi. This is Pat from Cincinnati.
Hello? Yes, what's your question or comment?
Yes, can you hear me? This is Pat from Cincinnati.
Yes, hello, Pat. We can hear you.
Great, great. Well, first of all, thank you all for this really helpful topic. It's great to hear about women attorneys and their experiences. I have a question for you. Since several of you mentioned that you come out of liberal arts background, is there one non-legal class that you found most helpful? This is more for someone who's a high school senior or first-year collegian that you think was most valuable to you, and is there a course that you wish you had taken in preparation for your law career? Thanks again for listening to my question. I'll hang up now and listen.
Very good question. Judge, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned earlier, I started out as an engineering major at Purdue and decided that wasn't where I wanted to direct my time and talent, and became a liberal arts major, majoring in political science and philosophy. And so certainly the political science classes were very useful because they taught me about how our government worked and the three branches of government and how bills became laws, and really dialed deep into the workings of our government, which became very helpful as a lawyer, understanding that in terms of research and legislative history and the like, and some of the other dynamics that go into the laws that you study in law school. So political science, I think, was a great avenue for being prepared for law school and carrying that on into my legal career. And then philosophy, actually, I thought was a wonderful major as well, because The nature of philosophy is trying to ask critical questions, to try to get to the essential meaning of life and the essential meaning of what the world is about. And so it taught critical thinking skills and analytical ability. And so I found that just absolutely fascinating and carried over directly into the skill set that they try to teach law students. So I felt like I had a leg up because I had been through many of those critical thinking exercises. But I think there's so many majors. History, for example, is a great avenue of study for people that want to become lawyers, because so much of the law, we look at how do we solve today's problem by casting retrospectively and trying to figure out how is this problem solved in the past, and can we bring those historical lessons forward to apply them to this situation. And so I think there are a lot of different areas in the liberal arts that have a great deal of bearing on legal analysis and legal thinking.
Anne, our caller, has hung up, but I'm sure she's interested in your response as well as the judges. Any subject you wish you had taken as a high school student or college student and did not? And
well, I as I said, started out as a chemistry major and then became an economics major. But honestly, looking back, I think I would have gone for a much more rounded liberal arts education. I loved my Greek civilizations classes, my history classes, doing things that make you well-rounded. And really the law, especially if you're doing trial work, if you're a litigator, I think it's a study of people, how people are going to respond to things, and how to tell a story. So if you can take English courses that teach you how to tell a story, if you can take writing courses that can teach you how to write and communicate well on paper, organizing your thoughts, that sort of thing, I think that being able to communicate and tell a human story is very important for the law.
Cassandra?
I completely agree with you, Anne, and it's really a real reason why I went into psychology as a major was because I wanted to learn more about how people thought and processed the world around them. But I do a lot of business litigation and I do a lot of probate litigation, and I've often talked to my husband about going back to school. Our student debt to income ratio is a little too high for that. But I've talked about going back and doing a lot of finance classes and business classes. I think it's very important that we understand how to take care of a balanced budget. Important to understand how taxes affect not only us as individuals, but also the corporations and our, when you go to pass, you have to prepare on passing your income, your assets on to your future generation. And so you want to understand how that will affect them. And so I think business and finance and tax are very important to at least my practice, and I would want to go back and learn more about that.
Well, in the back of my head, I hear Judge Grady because he frequently used Latin terms, and I studied Latin in high school and college, and I think that was a critical course. It helps you understand some legal terms before they're fully explained to you because you can translate them. And I was a Spanish major, so I was able to utilize that with some clients. I would occasionally get a call from federal court from Judge Mers, and he'd ask me to come over and translate for someone back in the day. Now the courts would be in an uproar about that because I was not a certified translator.
Correct.
But once again, folks, we welcome your call. The number should be up there on the screen momentarily. The number is 223-5311. If you have a question, as I said, we have decades of experience here on the panel, women that have been practicing for many years, and we're happy to have them here this evening. Let's talk about maybe, Judge, the hardest case you ever had, either as a litigator or as a judge to preside over. I know there might be some privacy issues, but to tell us a little bit about a tough case that you handled.
Well, as a judge, the toughest cases, and Judge Donovan, I know that you can relate to this because you see them, and you saw them when you were on the trial court bench, and you saw them when you were a public defender. The hardest cases are the ones that are just imbued with tragedy from any perspective you look at it. People have made bad decisions with regard to their conduct, and it's resulted in a tragedy, and oftentimes what has driven them to their undesirable conduct has been tragedy in their own lives. And so those are just hard because it's hard to have juries get exposed to tragedy occurring in such close proximity to them, and they are challenging in terms of evaluating, in light of this horrible tragedy, what's the appropriate punishment that also can be protective of the community and rehabilitative for the defendant in a criminal case that's involved in that. So those are just very difficult cases. And then in private practice, I worked on very, very large disputes between corporations, and the challenge was just in assimilating and synthesizing so much information. The advent of computers, where now we're talking about terabytes upon terabytes of emails and electronic documents, and trying to sift through that massive information and boil it down to a handful of important documents, because at the end of the day, you've got to go in front of a jury and tell the story, and you can't do that with a million documents. You've got to really condense things down. And so those would be very challenging cases as well, where you're just overwhelmed with the amount of initial information that's involved in the dispute.
It's curious that you mentioned telling your story to a jury, because I was thinking of Mary Taylor, who was an attorney in our community who practiced law with her husband for 63 years. And when she became a lawyer, she was able to practice in Texas, the state of Texas, but she was not able to serve on a jury in the state of Texas because women were not permitted to serve on juries until 1954. And she became a lawyer before 1954. So we've come a long way. Anne, do you have any comment on that subject that Judge Wiseman just covered? Anything to add?
Difficult cases that
Yes.
we've had? I think that the hardest case that I've had, I represented a fellow attorney who had been sued along with his wife, and it was a claim for fraud, and they hired me themselves because even though I do insurance defense work, insurance does not cover that sort of thing. And so to walk a fellow attorney through the process that they already knew but did not know from that perspective, and frankly were being sued because they were an attorney, that was hard to walk them through the process and go through the trial process as well. And I mean, fortunately, it was a unanimous defense verdict, so that was good. But just to see the pain that was for them, and you see that all the time, but sometimes I feel that clients, a lot of my clients are feel a little bit more distant from it. Some of them take it very, very personally. But that was to sort of represent a brother in the law was difficult.
And Cassandra, how about you? Either a difficult case or maybe an outcome that was particularly gratifying?
You know, I've only been practicing for 5 years, so I haven't had a lot of cases come through. But like I said earlier, I do a lot of probate litigation, and every time a new client comes in seeking an attorney for that, it is difficult because it's an instance where someone in their family has passed and the family is now feuding. And truly, that type of litigation tears families apart. And it is very tragic to see families just break in that way and try to pick up the pieces and move on. But I have to hand it to you judges. I used to clerk for Judge Singer on the Common Pleas bench, and you both served to that bench, and you both are responsible for sentencing offenders in our community. And when I watched Judge Singer take on that responsibility, it was a great weight on him, and I imagine it's a great weight on both of you. And I know that you've moved on from that position, but certainly at the appellate level, you were reminded of that weight, and I admire both of you for taking on that responsibility for us.
Well, we appreciate that. I mean, I'm sure I do, and I'm sure you do, Mary. I can remember when Judge Langer was sworn in many years ago. He was sworn in by his good friend, Judge James Brogan, who I served with, and he gave a very powerful speech about the gravitas, the severity, the significance of the judgments he would make, and he compared it to being a priest. Dennis is Roman Catholic, as is Judge Brogan, as am I, and going out and saying Mass. And I remember he spoke far more eloquently than I just did, but it made an impact as far as your judgments impact people's livelihoods, their freedom, and it's a difficult job, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But I want to tell our viewing audience, please, you're welcome to give us a call at 223-5311. And Cassandra, you just mentioned what is called therapeutic jurisprudence. And for the benefit of our audience, we have multiple therapeutic courts in Montgomery County, some new, some not so new. Myself and my colleague, Judge Jeffrey Froelich, were drug court judges. We now have a significant number of other therapeutic courts. And Judge, could you tell us what those currently are in Montgomery County?
Sure. So in Montgomery County, we have a women's therapeutic court, we have a men's drug court, we have a mental health court, as well as a veterans treatment court. And our juvenile division has a family treatment court, and Dayton Municipal Court has a mental health court. And so we've developed these many different specialty courts to try to zero in as accurately as we can on the interdictions that are necessary through the criminal justice system to try to refocus and redirect people to get their lives back on track. And these courts take a much more holistic approach to an individual than a traditional criminal justice model does. And the Women's Therapeutic Court, which I preside over, looks particularly at women who have substance use disorders or addiction. And the science has shown that many of those women are self-medicating through drugs or alcohol to compensate for a past trauma that has occurred in their life. Sometimes instances of domestic violence, other types of physical or sexual abuse. And so we understand through science that's been brought to bear on how can you make people that have suffered trauma and have lapsed into becoming involved with the criminal justice system, how can you re-engage them in a productive and constructive way with society? And the traditional criminal justice approach of resorting first to punishment and sort of second to rehabilitation doesn't work well for that population. They tend to simply recidivate or reoffend over and over. But if we can intercede and address the underlying trauma while we're simultaneously addressing the substance use disorder, then we have tremendous success. So my colleague Greg Singer founded the Women's Therapeutic Court, and I took that over a little over a year ago and have another 2 years on my term. And the exciting thing for the citizens of Montgomery County is that we have so many judges who've been willing to undergo the extensive training to take over these specialty courts and really devote their heart and soul to making them successful, which benefits the individuals engaged in those programs, but more importantly, it benefits every citizen of Montgomery County because we're making people that were charged with crimes successful in their life, and they're becoming taxpayers, and they are not reoffending. And so it's a wonderful and successful program.
It looks like we're running out of time, and I think I'd like to close with a quote that is contained in an article from Notre Dame Law Review about therapeutic jurisprudence, because it's important. And this was said by Thomas Jefferson: "The care of human life and happiness, and not their destruction, is the first and only legitimate object of good government." And I think that's what therapeutic courts try to do. They work collaboratively, the judges, the prosecutors, the defense lawyers, with the accused and with the addiction team, in order to minimize the impact of imprisonment upon our populace. Anything to add, Cassandra? Because I know you worked with Judge Singer. Rather briefly, though, we're running out of time.
Sure. I think that the therapeutic courts also try to unite the accused with resources in the community to help them succeed. These courts want to see these individuals succeed, and I think that's the real goal, is to see them build new and better lives and get paired with those services that can help them do that.
Well, thank you, ladies. You've been a wonderful panel. I know you brought years of experience. Judge Wiseman from City Commission through the Common Pleas Court, I thank you for all you do and for being here tonight. And Keaton, thank you, and I wish you success in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Judge.
And Cassandra, it was certainly nice to meet you, and maybe I'll meet that baby boy someday.
Absolutely.
And we'd like to thank the volunteers here at DATV. Mike Monta has told me that you are entirely a volunteer staff, and we appreciate that. I'd like to give a shout out to Mike's wife, Vasa, who's a classmate of mine and one of the top women in my class from UG 1977. Thank you for watching, and Mike will be back in a month.